The vastness of space held many secrets, but none quite as peculiar as the cargo ship drifting through the Orient sector. Its pilot, Jack Thompson, was doing what humans did best, finding ways to make money in a galaxy that considered his species barely worth noticing. Jack's ship, the Lucky Star, was an old but reliable vessel. While other species zoomed around in their sleek, crystalline ships powered by quantum drives, he made do with simple fusion engines and sturdy metal hull plates. The cargo hold was full of Earth coffee beans, a surprisingly popular commodity among certain alien species who found the drink fascinating. As he navigated through an asteroid field, his ship's basic sensors picked up something unusual, a distress signal, but it was hidden beneath layers of interference. Most modern ships would have filtered it out as noise, but Jack's older equipment was less discriminating. "That's odd," he muttered, adjusting his course. The signal was coming from a small moon orbiting a gas giant. According to his charts, there shouldn't be anything there. The closer he got, the more certain he became that something was wrong. Hidden among the moon's craters, he spotted the telltale signs of a pirate base, the kind that preyed on wealthy travelers through this sector. Then he saw it, a royal ship bearing the marks of the Stellar Empire, partially hidden under camouflage netting. News had spread across the galaxy about the kidnapping of Princess Rose, but no one had been able to find her. The pirates had chosen this location well. It was perfect for hiding from the Empire's advanced scanning technology. Jack knew he should call the authorities. But out here, that would take days, and who would believe a human anyway? The Empire's ships would scan right past this place, their advanced technology working against them. He landed his ship in a crater, far enough away to avoid detection. Through his binoculars, simple glass lenses that worked better than digital scanners in this environment, he observed the base. The pirates were using scrambler fields to hide from modern sensors, but they couldn't hide from plain eyesight. Guards patrolled with plasma rifles, their shields glowing faintly in the dim light. Jack counted their patterns, noting the gaps in their coverage. The pirates relied too heavily on their technology, assuming no one could get past their sensors. "Time to show them what a primitive human can do," he said to himself, checking his old projectile pistol. While everyone else used energy weapons, he preferred something that couldn't be stopped by standard shield technology. Using the moon's low gravity to his advantage, Jack made his way from crater to crater. The pirates' sensors were looking for engine signatures and energy readings, not a person in a simple pressure suit. Inside the base, he heard voices. Following them led him to a holding cell where Princess Rose was being kept. She was striking, with features that marked her as clearly non-human. Silvery skin and eyes that seemed to shine with their own light. She looked up as he entered, surprise evident on her face. "Who are you?" she whispered, staring at him through the energy barrier. "Just a human delivery man who took a wrong turn," Jack replied, studying the cell's control panel. "But I'm thinking maybe I can help." "A human?" She sounded incredulous. "But how did you even find this place?" "The pirates' technology. Sometimes the old ways work best," he said, pulling out a small device he built himself. It wasn't elegant like Imperial technology, but it could overload simple electronic locks. The barrier flickered and died. Alarms began blaring immediately. "Time to go," Jack said, taking her hand. "Your Highness, I suggest we run." As they raced through the corridors, pirates converging on their location, Jack couldn't help but smile. He was about to show the galaxy that sometimes the simple solutions were the best ones. And this was just the beginning. Alarms screamed through the pirate base as Jack led Princess Rose through the winding corridors. The pirates' energy weapons lit up the hallways with bright flashes, but their shots were wild and unfocused. They weren't used to dealing with targets that didn't show up on their targeting systems. "How are you doing this?" Princess Rose asked as they ducked behind a corner. "Their weapons should be tracking us automatically." Jack grinned, pulling out his old pistol. "That's the problem with relying too much on technology, Your Highness. Sometimes the basics work better." He peeked around the corner and fired twice. The sound of metal bullets hitting metal was followed by surprised yells as 2 pirates fell, their shields useless against physical projectiles. "But that's primitive weaponry," she exclaimed. "Primitive, but effective," Jack replied. "Now we need to get to the hangar. Any idea where that might be?" The princess nodded, her silver eyes glowing brighter with determination. 3 levels down, but it's heavily guarded." "Perfect," Jack said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out several small metal objects. "These are what we humans call smoke grenades. Nothing fancy, just chemistry." They made their way down through the base, with Jack using everything he'd learned from years of watching old action movies and his military veteran father's stories. The pirates, used to fighting with advanced targeting systems and energy weapons, were completely unprepared for smoke screens, physical projectiles, and good old-fashioned hand-to-hand combat. In one corridor, Jack used a simple mirror to peek around corners, while the pirates' complex sensor arrays were still trying to recalibrate from the smoke. In another, he used a handful of ball bearings scattered across the floor to send heavily armored pirates tumbling. "This is incredible," Princess Rose whispered as they watched another group of pirates slip and fall. "Our royal guards train for years with the most advanced combat systems in the galaxy, but you're defeating them with toys." "Not toys," Jack corrected, leading her down a maintenance shaft. "Just simple tools used cleverly. Humans had to learn to fight smart before we had fancy technology." They reached the hangar level, but the main door was sealed with an energy barrier. The pirates were waiting on the other side, their weapons ready. Jack studied the door's control panel, then looked up at the ceiling with a thoughtful expression. "Your Highness, how good are you at climbing?" Minutes later, the pirates were surprised when the door finally opened to reveal nothing. While they were confused, searching for targets that didn't appear on their scanners, Jack and the princess were crawling through the ventilation system above them. Another security weakness the pirates had ignored because their sensors didn't show any threats up there. They dropped down behind the pirates' position, right next to Jack's ship, but just as they were about to reach it, a massive figure stepped out from behind a pillar, the pirate captain himself, wearing the most advanced battle armor Jack had ever seen. "Impressive, human," the captain growled, his armor humming with energy. "But this ends now." Jack pushed the princess behind him, his mind racing. The captain's armor would stop bullets, energy weapons, and most explosives. But as Jack looked around the hangar, he noticed something that made him smile. The emergency fire suppression system. "You're right," Jack said, raising his pistol. "This does end now." He fired, not at the captain, but at the sprinkler system above. Water rained down, and the captain laughed, until his electrical armor began to short-circuit. In moments, the mighty pirate leader was twitching on the ground, defeated by simple water and electricity. They made it to Jack's ship, but as they took off, a laser blast caught the hull. Jack was thrown against the control panel, a sharp pain shooting through his chest. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Princess Rose's concerned face, and the stars stretching out before them as they escaped into space. Jack woke up to the sight of a crystal ceiling that sparkled like diamonds. He was lying in what appeared to be a medical bay, but unlike any he'd seen before. Everything gleamed with an otherworldly shimmer, and soft lights pulsed along the walls in rhythm with his heartbeat. "The primitive is awake," a voice said nearby. Jack turned his head to see a tall, elegant doctor with metallic skin examining a holographic display. The doctor's tone held the kind of dismissive attitude he'd grown used to from advanced species. "His name is Jack." Princess Rose's voice rang out as she entered the room. She looked different now, dressed in royal attire that seemed to catch and reflect every beam of light. "And he saved my life." The doctor bowed slightly but continued looking at Jack as if he were an interesting specimen in a zoo. "Yes, Your Highness. Though I must say, his physiology is remarkably basic. We had to use simplified treatment methods. Jack tried to sit up but winced at the pain in his chest. How long was I out? 3 standard cycles, Rose answered, moving closer to his bed. You took a serious hit during our escape. I managed to pilot your ship here, to the Royal Medical Center on our capital world. Your ship's navigation system was charmingly outdated, another voice added. A tall, regal man entered the room, the king himself, his skin shimmering like liquid mercury. Though I suppose we should be grateful it was simple enough for my daughter to operate in an emergency. Jack noticed how the king's words, while seemingly grateful, carried an undertone of condescension. Simple works sometimes, he replied carefully. Saved your daughter, didn't it? The king's expression tightened slightly. Indeed, though I must point out that if our royal guards had been there with their advanced combat systems. Father, Rose interrupted, those same advanced systems are why no one could find me. The pirates specifically designed their hideout to fool our technology. Jack found me because he wasn't relying on complex scanning systems. The king waved his hand dismissively. A fortunate accident. Nevertheless, we are grateful for your assistance. He turned to his daughter. The Grand Council is waiting for your report on the kidnapping. They're particularly interested in how the pirates managed to bypass our security. After they left, Jack spent the next few hours watching the medical staff treat him while pretending not to study him. Their advanced healing devices seemed to struggle with his primitive biology, and they eventually resorted to what they considered outdated methods that worked perfectly fine. Later that day, Princess Rose returned. She sat beside his bed, her expression troubled. The council didn't believe me, she said quietly, about how you rescued me. They think I'm exaggerating because of trauma. They can't accept that a human with simple tools outsmarted pirates with advanced technology. Jack laughed, then regretted it as pain shot through his chest. Let them think what they want. I've learned that sometimes being underestimated is an advantage. But it's not right. Rose protested. They're so blinded by their belief in technological superiority that they can't see what's right in front of them. Even now, they're focusing on upgrading our security systems instead of considering that maybe, sometimes, simpler solutions might work better. Jack watched as a medical drone struggled to clean around his bed, its advanced sensors confused by the simple cotton blanket he'd been given. Your people have achieved amazing things, he said carefully. But amazing doesn't always mean better. Sometimes a broom works better than a quantum cleaning field. Rose looked at him thoughtfully. Maybe that's what we've forgotten. In our rush to advance, we'd forgotten the value of basic solutions. She stood up, smoothing her glowing robes. Rest now. You'll need your strength. Something tells me your time here isn't going to be as peaceful as the doctors would like. As she left, Jack settled back into his bed, watching the confused drone still trying to figure out his blanket. He had a feeling she was right about that. 3 days into his recovery, Jack noticed something odd about the medical center's lighting system. The usually steady glow would occasionally flicker, almost imperceptibly to most, but his human eyes, less adapted to the bright artificial light, caught every variation. Something's wrong with your power grid, he mentioned to a nurse who was checking his bandages. She gave him the same patronizing look he'd grown used to. Impossible. Our systems are perfect, she replied. Your primitive perception must be confused by our advanced lighting. But later that day, the entire medical wing plunged into darkness for 2 seconds before the backup systems engaged. Jack heard panicked voices in the hallway as medical staff rushed to check on patients connected to life support systems. Princess Rose visited him shortly after, looking worried. The engineers can't figure it out. All diagnostics show the systems are working perfectly, but these power fluctuations keep happening across the palace. Jack sat up in bed, ignoring the pain. Let me guess. Your diagnostics are all based on quantum readings and energy pattern analysis. Of course, we use the most advanced. Has anyone actually looked at the physical power conduits? Jack interrupted. You know, with their eyes. Rose blinked. Why would they? The sensors. Sometimes the old ways work best, Jack said, swinging his legs off the bed. Mind giving me a tour of your power distribution center? Despite protests from the medical staff, Rose helped Jack to the massive room that housed the palace's main power systems. Engineers huddled around holographic displays, arguing about quantum fluctuations and energy pattern distortions. Jack ignored them, walking slowly along the main power conduits that ran along the walls. He pressed his hand against one of the crystal tubes, feeling for vibrations. "There's your problem," he said after a few minutes. "You've got a physical crack in this conduit, probably from thermal expansion. Your sensors can't detect it because they're calibrated for energy readings, not structural damage." The chief engineer scoffed. "Impossible. These conduits are made of pure quantum crystal. They don't crack." "Everything cracks eventually," Jack replied. "Get me a light and something reflective." Rose handed him her mirror and a small light. Jack positioned them carefully, angling the light just right. There, visible to the naked eye but invisible to the advanced sensors, was a hairline crack running the length of the conduit. The engineers stared in disbelief. But how did you know?" "The power fluctuations had a pattern," Jack explained. "They happened more frequently when the ambient temperature changed. Basic thermodynamics. Even quantum crystals expand and contract with heat." "But our sensors. We're looking for complex problems when the answer was simple," Rose interrupted. "Just like with the pirates." Over the next few hours, Jack helped the engineers develop a repair plan. They wanted to use exotic materials and energy fields, but he convinced them to try a simple ceramic patch, something that would flex with the crystal's thermal expansion. To everyone's surprise except Jack's, it worked perfectly. The power fluctuations stopped immediately. That evening, Rose found Jack back in his medical room, looking out at the city's glittering skyline. "You keep surprising them," she said, sitting beside him. "First the rescue, now this. But they still don't see it, do they?" Jack shook his head. "They're so focused on finding complex solutions that they miss the simple ones. It's not their fault. When you have incredibly advanced technology, every problem looks like it needs an incredibly advanced solution." "But not every problem does," Rose mused. "Sometimes you just need a human with a mirror and a flashlight." Jack grinned. They both laughed, but their moment was interrupted by a distant rumbling sound. The floor trembled slightly, and the lights flickered again, but differently this time. Jack's expression turned serious. "That wasn't your power system." Rose stood up, her face pale. "No, it wasn't." She looked at Jack with worry in her silver eyes. "Something's wrong." The palace alarm began to wail. The palace shook with another explosion as Jack and Princess Rose ran through the corridors. Royal guards rushed past them, their advanced armor gleaming and energy weapons humming with power. "The pirates," Rose said, her voice tight with worry. "They must have followed us here somehow." They reached the palace's main security center just as the king was demanding answers from his generals. Holographic displays showed multiple ships breaching the palace's defensive shields as if they weren't even there. "Impossible," one general shouted. "Our shields are the most advanced in the galaxy. Nothing should be able to penetrate them." Jack studied the displays, watching the pattern of the attacks. "They're using your own technology against you," he said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. The king's face darkened. "This is no time for primitive observations. We need real solutions." Another explosion rocked the palace. The lights flickered, and several security screens went dark. "They've adapted," Jack continued, ignoring the king's dismissal. "When they had me captive, they learned how your systems work. Now they're using that knowledge to bypass them." A guard captain burst into the room. "Your Majesty, the pirates. They're inside the palace. Our weapons aren't working. Their shields are somehow reflecting our energy beams back at us." Jack watched as panic spread across the faces of the Empire's finest military minds. Their advanced weapons, their sophisticated shields, their quantum targeting systems, all useless against an enemy that had learned to counter them. "It's an arms race," Jack said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We had these on Earth centuries ago. Each side keeps developing better technology until someone finds a way to make all that technology worthless." "Then what do you suggest?" the king demanded, his composure cracking as another explosion shook the building. "Since you seem to have all the answers." Before Jack could respond, the main doors to the security center burst open. Pirates poured in, wearing armor that seemed to absorb every energy blast fired at them. The Royal Guard's weapons were useless, their shots either passing through the pirates harmlessly or bouncing back at them. "Your advanced civilization ends today," the lead pirate announced, his voice distorted by his helmet. "We've learned all your secrets, all your technologies, and we've made them obsolete." The king stepped forward, his royal dignity intact even in crisis. "We will never surrender to pirates." "You don't have a choice," the pirate leader laughed. "Your weapons can't touch us. Your shields can't stop us. Your sensors can't track us. Everything you relied on has failed." Jack moved closer to Rose, whispering, "Your people stopped learning basic combat because they relied too much on technology, didn't they?" She nodded slightly. "Our warriors train with energy weapons and powered armor from childhood. Without them, they don't know how to fight." Jack finished. He looked around the room, his mind racing. The pirates had countered every piece of advanced technology, but in doing so, they'd made themselves vulnerable to simpler solutions. The pirates were advancing, their shield systems humming with stolen technology. But Jack noticed something. Their movements were clumsy, weighed down by armor designed to counter energy weapons. "Your Highness," he said to the king, "I have an idea, but you'll have to trust me, and your people will have to be willing to fight. The old way." The king looked at his fallen guards, his useless defenses, and his daughter's confident expression as she looked at Jack. He straightened his back and made a decision that would change his empire forever. "What do you need?" Jack allowed himself a small smile. "First, we need to reach your armory. And then, I'm going to teach your guards how humans used to fight before we had fancy technology." The pirate leader stepped forward, his advanced armor gleaming. "Whatever you're planning, it won't work. We've countered everything you have." "No," Jack replied, his eyes hard. "You've countered everything you expected us to have. And that's going to be your biggest mistake." Time was running out as Jack led a small group through the palace's back corridors. Princess Rose, the king, and a handful of royal guards followed him to the ancient armory, a place no one had visited in generations. "Here," Jack said, pushing open heavy doors. Inside, covered in dust, were weapons that the Empire had long forgotten. Simple metal swords, spears, and bows lined the walls, relics from before the age of energy weapons. "These are museum pieces," one guard said dismissively. "These are your salvation," Jack corrected, grabbing a sword. "The pirates countered your energy weapons by studying them. But I bet they never studied these." Rose's eyes lit up with understanding. "Their shields are calibrated for energy weapons, not solid objects," Jack finished, "just like in the pirate base." The king lifted an ancient bow, studying it with newfound respect. "But none of us know how to use these." "Then I'll teach you." Quickly, Jack positioned himself in front of the group. The basics of physical combat haven't changed in thousands of years. For the next few minutes, Jack gave the fastest combat training session in history. He showed them how to hold weapons, how to move without depending on powered armor, how to use their opponent's weight against them. "Remember," he said as they heard pirates approaching, "they're not used to their armor. They've never had to really fight in it. It's all automated systems and computer assistance. Without those working properly, that armor is just heavy metal weighing them down." The first group of pirates found them ready. They laughed at the sight of the primitive weapons, until those same weapons slipped right through their energy shields. The pirates had designed their defenses to stop plasma bolts and laser beams, not steel and wood. Jack led the charge, moving with the natural grace of someone who understood physical combat. The pirates, encumbered by their heavy armor and unused to fighting without computer assistance, fell one by one. "Push them back to the main hall," Jack shouted. "Their armor's too bulky for them to maneuver well in tight spaces." The Royal Guards, quick learners despite generations of relying on technology, began to understand. They used the palace's architecture against the pirates, forcing them into narrow corridors where their advanced armor became a hindrance. In the main hall, the pirate leader watched in disbelief as his forces were driven back by weapons he had dismissed as obsolete. His own armor, designed to be impenetrable to the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, offered no protection against a simple sword thrust. "Impossible," he roared, raising his weapon. "Our technology is superior." "Technology isn't everything," Jack said, facing him. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." The final battle was brief. The pirate leader's advanced targeting systems and powered armor meant nothing against basic human combat skills. Jack moved like water around the clumsy attacks, finding gaps in the armor that no energy weapon could have exploited. When it was over, the pirate leader lay defeated, his supposedly invincible armor breached by nothing more sophisticated than well-forged steel. The king stood in the aftermath, still holding his bow, looking at the fallen pirates and their useless advanced technology. "All our progress, all our advancement," he said quietly, "and we were safe by weapons from our own ancient past." "Not by the weapons," Rose corrected him. "By the wisdom to know when to use them." She looked at Jack with admiration. By someone who understood that newer doesn't always mean better. Jack leaned on his sword, tired but satisfied. "Technology is a tool, not a solution. Sometimes you need quantum computers and energy shields. And sometimes you need a human with a sword," Rose finished, smiling. The king turned to Jack, his previous condescension replaced with genuine respect. "It seems we have much to learn from Earth's primitive species." But before Jack could respond, a palace guard burst into the hall, his face pale with urgency. "Your Majesty, we've received word. There are more pirate ships approaching. Hundreds of them. They'll be here within hours." The brief moment of victory evaporated. They had won this battle. But the war was far from over. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Stellar Empire was packed with representatives from every advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had gathered for an emergency session as news of the massive pirate fleet approaching the capital spread panic through the sectors. Princess Rose stood before them all, her silver skin glowing under the crystal lights. Behind her stood Jack, looking out of place in his simple earth clothes among the ornate robes and bioengineered fashions of the galaxy's elite. "Distinguished members of the Assembly," Rose began, her voice clear and strong. "We face a crisis that our technology cannot solve. The pirates have turned our own advanced systems against us, but I stand here to tell you that I know how we can win." Murmurs filled the hall. A tall delegate stood up, his holographic robes shifting colors as he moved. "Your Highness, our combined fleet is already assembling, with our advanced weapons." "Which they can counter," Rose interrupted. "Just as they countered our palace defenses, just as they countered everything we threw at them. Everything except." She turned and gestured to Jack. "A human." Someone scoffed. "Is this a joke?" The king stood up from his throne. "It is no joke. This human saved my daughter from these pirates. He then saved our palace when they attacked. And now he has a plan to save our empire." Jack stepped forward, fighting back his nervousness at addressing the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "Your technologies are incredible," he began, "but they've become predictable. The pirates know exactly how you'll fight, what weapons you'll use, what strategies you'll employ. You've all evolved in the same direction, toward the same types of solutions." He pulled out a simple piece of paper, actual paper, which made several delegates gasp, and unfolded it to reveal a drawing. "This is how we'll beat them," he said, Not with quantum torpedoes or plasma cannons, but with something they'll never expect. Something so old it's new again. The assembly erupted in protests, but Princess Rose raised her hand for silence. "Watch," she commanded. She activated a hologram showing the battle in the palace. The delegates fell quiet as they watched advanced pirates being defeated by simple weapons and basic combat skills. "This human," Rose declared, "showed us that our greatest weakness was our belief that advanced always means better. We forgot our roots, forgot that sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. And now he has a plan to defeat the entire pirate fleet using the same principle." Jack explained his strategy, using principles from Earth's ancient naval warfare combined with simple physics that the pirates' advanced shields couldn't counter. With each word, understanding began to dawn on the faces of the assembly members. "But this would mean admitting that our way isn't always the best way," one delegate protested weakly. "It means admitting that different perspectives have value," Rose corrected, "that we can learn from those we considered primitive. That true advancement means knowing when to move forward and when to look back." The king stood again. "I have authorized this plan. My daughter trusts this human. I trust this human. The question is, will you trust that maybe, just maybe, a species you dismissed as primitive might see solutions that we, in our advancement, have become blind to?" One by one, the delegates began to nod. Jack's plan was approved, and within hours, the combined fleet began implementing strategies that hadn't been used in warfare for thousands of years. When the pirate fleet arrived, expecting to face advanced energy weapons and quantum shields, they found themselves against tactics they had no defense against. Their sophisticated systems, designed to counter the most advanced technology in the galaxy, were useless against simple physics and basic strategy. The victory was total. As the assembly celebrated, Princess Rose took Jack's hand and faced the gathered delegates. "Let this be a lesson," she announced. "True wisdom isn't about how advanced your technology is. It's about knowing when to use it and when to try something different. Something simple. Something human." The assembly erupted in applause, and for the first time in galactic history, humanity's place among the stars was secured not by their technology, but by their unique way of thinking. Jack just smiled. Sometimes the best solutions were the simple ones, after all.